Sea is something that, by all measures, shouldn't exist. A phenomenon so strange it's rewriting what we know about the origins of life on Earth, and perhaps even outside of it. In 2020, the Ocean Explorer research ship launched a submersible into the depths of the Red Sea. After 8 hours of scouring the abyssal plain, they had found nothing. Just a lifeless desert in the perpetual darkness. But moments before they were about to give up and return to the surface,
The ocean is the most. The ocean? Was it picking up my sound regardless? Wow, it was. What microphone is it connected to? But no, the ocean is the most satisfying and cool. Hold on, let me just check this out real quick. Okay. Right. Okay. The ocean is the most interesting thing. There's so many creatures under there, and we only explored, I think they said like 9% of it. So there's like so much stuff down
the
there that we could
submersible's
like
headlights caught something in
discover.
the distance.
So many
A
new
murky
species of
shape
animals.
about 20 meters wide, which looked like a dark mirror laying flat on the seabed. Squinting, they made out what appeared to be a thick fog hanging over it. And as they got closer, they realized what they were seeing should have been impossible. The surface of that giant mirror wasn't glass or rock or even sand. It was water. How could that be? They were already underwater. But it was right there in front of their very eyes. What appeared to be an underwater lake at the bottom of the ocean, encircled by a beach.
And these underwater, I don't know if they're about to go over it right now or soon. But these underwater lakes, certain animals that go in, they'll come up dead. Like they'll float to the top and be dead. But they won't float to the top of the ocean. They'll just float to the top of the underwater. One day, I hope they can build a submarine or like a camera submersible that can go in there and see what's inside of it. Because I know there's some cool shit in there.
With gentle, slow-motion waves lapping against the shore. Only a handful of humans have ever seen this sight in person. And we now know something that makes it even more eerie. Any creature who dares to venture below the surface of that strange water
This is what I was talking
never
about.
comes back. And yet, down here in the deathly darkness, there is something unthinkable. A strange, primitive form of life, existing in a way completely alien to what we ever thought possible on Earth. But now, in 2025,
Wait,
thanks to a
starfish.
series of remarkable discoveries, this surreal underwater environment is helping to revolutionize our understanding of how life can exist on Earth. And maybe beyond. So where did this mysterious underwater lake come from? What could possibly live here? And whatever it is, could it be the key to understanding how life began?
Just
I'm James
imagine
Stewart, and you're watching Astrum Earth.
a big ass shark coming out of that underwater lake and just like eating something. Oh, and just going back down. Like the little worm off of SpongeBob on that
Join
one
me in this
episode.
video as we journey beneath the surface and come face to face with whatever is hiding down there.
What you got? What in the
Now, I should start off by saying, despite making giant leaps in our understanding of underwater lakes over the last few years, Ocean Explorer was not the first to find one. The earliest reference to an underwater lake dates back to the 1st of March 1964, and it's a tiny article barely taking up a quarter of a page buried deep in a scientific journal. The author, a humble English oceanographer called Henry Charnock, had found what he called anomalous bottom water, 2 kilometers under the Red Sea. I like to imagine the wonder and perhaps even the terror that Henry felt when research indicated it was possible for a lake to exist at the bottom of the ocean. What it was or why it existed, he had no idea. All he knew was that it was there and that it should have been impossible. Without knowing it, Henry had stumbled on something that would shape how we understand life on our planet forever. While he could only guess at the water's origin, Henry spotted one intriguing detail. It was incredibly salty. Far saltier than the water above it.
That makes so much sense because that explains why it looks like this. Like, have you ever seen super salty water in regular water? It has like this boiling look. Like,
This
look at it.
seemingly minor observation are saltier than the water.
Look at the way like it's like coming off. That's probably because of how salty it is, it's probably more condensed. So it's just a river of condensed salty water. And that's why when a whole bunch of fish go down there, I shouldn't say that's why, that's probably why when a whole bunch of fish go down there, they die. Fish, crustaceans, etc., etc.
Above it. This
You can't
seemingly minor
handle
observation gives us the first clue to finding out what these bizarre formations
I forgot what the
actually
word
are.
was, but the
It
higher
seems
salt content of the
impossible.
water.
How does a lake in the middle of an ocean exist? One thing I am not
And it looks like
salty
it's
about
steaming,
is my
too.
choice of skincare. We've
So there
once
might
again
be a
partnered with our
volcano
friends
bit
at
down there,
Geology
too.
to bring you skincare that
Oh
doesn't just
my
float,
God.
it makes waves. If I'm honest, my old skincare routine was pretty washed up, but since using Geology, it's gone
Should I do those on my
back
videos?
in the sea, but
I
not
should
in
do,
a swimming
I
pool.
should do
The high
W
salt
abs,
content in the
W
seawater
abs.
makes it more dense, so relatively speaking, you become less dense and rise to the surface. It's the same with an underwater lake. That incredibly salty water is more dense than the seawater around it.
That's what I'm saying. It's more dense because of the salt.
So it sits at the very bottom of the ocean, collecting in the natural depressions on the sea floor. In fact, the water here is so salty and so dense that a submersible literally bounces off the surface like a trampoline.
That's actually
Theoretically,
crazy.
if you were able to breathe and survive the pressure down there, the surface of the lake would feel like a giant waterbed. Scientists call these underwater lakes brine pools, and they can stretch up to 20 kilometers in length, forming majestic lakes, rivers, and even underwater waterfalls. But even
The
more
magnet, the
curiously,
Mariana
they
Trench
can
probably
reach
has one of
hundreds
these,
of
and it
meters
actually
in
goes
depth.
deeper, probably.
So you might be wondering, what stops the brine from just spreading out and mixing with the surrounding seawater? How is there such a clear surface line? After all, if you were to add a splash of brine to a glass of fresh water, it wouldn't sink and collect at the bottom of the glass, would it? It would just mix in with the water, right? So what stops this from happening at the bottom of the ocean? Well, the answer comes down to 2 distinct natural processes working together in a unique way. The first has the
salt
complex
and,
name of double diffusive convection.
Double
And once again,
convection.
Henry's observations gave us the first clue of what was
Me
happening
saying that
here.
like I know what it is.
That anomalous water he noticed wasn't just unusually salty, but unusually warm.
That's
So
what I'm
imagine
saying.
at the
There might be a convection current. I'm just thinking about like if I use that word right, but like a volcano vent, a vent that's heating the water up and making like like it hotter, but then the salt, all the salt salinity or salt of the water is making it like denser, so it's just like falling. and it's like a heated, dense pool of salt water, saltier water than the salt water in the ocean. You know what I'm saying?
At the very bottom of the sea, you have this anomalous water that is both warm and salty. Directly above it, you have water that is cooler and less salty. This means that both salt and heat in the bottom water want to spread upwards to the top water. In theory, this should mean that the extra salty water just dissolves away and gets lost in the rest of the ocean. But here's the key thing. Heat spreads 100 times faster than salt, so naturally it gets there first. This means that the water directly above the surface of the lake is warmer than usual, which causes it to rise into the water above. Meanwhile, on the other side, the water directly below the surface of the lake gets cooler, which makes it sink down into the lake. As a result, the top layer of the lake wants to move further down into the lake rather
Wouldn't there
than
be like
up out of
something
it.
in the middle
And
that
the
like
seawater directly above it wants to move up and away from the lake rather than down into it. This double diffusive convection is what creates that sharp boundary between brine and
makes it like
seawater,
mount
which
so
causes a clear tide line to form, resulting in the surreal appearance of an underwater lake? But if you're especially eagle-eyed, you might have noticed something wrong with that model. Even if there is a clear-cut threshold between brine and regular water, there is still salt going across that line. So effectively, the lake is constantly losing brine to the water above. In theory then, the lake should vanish, like a rock
like
pool
burning off.
evaporating over time.
like yeah, not burning but evaporating.
And that's where the second natural process comes in. See, underwater lakes aren't just puddles of salty water, they're constantly in flux. Just as brine is continually vanishing into the water above, it's also being replenished from underneath. The lake exists only because of the delicate natural balance between these two opposing processes, the first trying to shrink the lake and the other to grow it. So where is it being replenished from? And what is this seemingly endless source of warm, salty water coming from deep in the earth? You may have heard of plate tectonics, but to answer this question, we need to understand salt tectonics.
There's salt tectonics. I never knew
Scientists
that.
scratch their heads about
They don't
this
teach
for
you this in
decades,
school, guys.
until eventually the
They don't
answer
teach you
began
this
to
in
reveal
school.
itself.
I've
Across
never
the
heard of
entire
salt
world, we've
tectonics.
found brine pools in just 3 places. And these 3 places all have one thing in common: a weird geological feature which allows these pools to form. The first we've mentioned already, the Red Sea. The other 2 are the Gulf of Mexico and the Mediterranean Sea. So what's the underlying feature they have in common? They're all bodies of water that aren't giant oceans, perhaps? They're all partly enclosed? Well, that's part of the answer.
The history of where it used to be, whenever Pangea was a thing, I'm assuming this was better thing. Whenever Pangea was a thing,
Here's the
those
key thing.
continents were
At
next
some
to each
point in
other.
their history, all 3 of these water bodies were cut off from the ocean.
Yeah,
During the
I knew
Jurassic
it.
period, the Gulf of Mexico was sealed off from the Atlantic Ocean by a narrow
Got
strip
cut
of
off.
land. More than 100 million years later, so was the Mediterranean. And by this point, the Red Sea had also been shut off from the waters of the Indian Ocean. When these seas got closed off from the ocean, they essentially became giant basins. With no new water flowing in, the remaining water in those basins evaporated over time, leaving behind something unusual: a thick residue of salt. Over the following millions of years, that salt residue was buried by layers of sediment, which pushed it deeper and deeper into the earth. So when those dried up basins eventually rejoined the oceans and filled with seawater again, they created a unique set of geological conditions. Above you have a sea, and below you have an enormous pile of salt. It's only because of the sediment layer in between that the salt doesn't come into contact with the seawater, but you might be able to guess what happens next. As the sediment keeps piling up over time and the salt gets buried deeper into the Earth's crust, something extraordinary happens. The sediment on top gets so heavy that it begins to squash the salt underneath, which forces it to shift and move around. This process, known as salt tectonics, causes warping and cracking in the sediment layer, which allows seawater to seep down over time and mix
This
with
is
the ancient
crazy.
salt
I
below.
never knew so. I just learned
This forms
something
an
new, bruh.
ultra-concentrated brine deep down
What?
in the earth.
It's like
As the sediment
superheated
continues to move
salt,
around,
bruh.
that deep underground brine, warmed by the Earth's heat, gets squeezed up into the ocean and settles on the ocean floor. Now, at last, finally, we've got ourselves an underwater lake. But brine doesn't just sit in lakes,
What's that
waiting
fish
for its
doing
next
down there?
victim to enter its salty domain. Brine can also flow underwater too. During a dive in 2018, the remotely operated vehicle that was part of the NOAA expedition to the Gulf of Mexico peered over a low rise in the sea floor, gazing towards the sediment-lined depression that lay below. It spotted a small pool, filled with the dark blue water we're accustomed to seeing with brine falls, accompanied by the graveyard of dead mussels and bright white shells that had fallen
Actually
victim
crazy.
to it. But
Oh,
as the
but you dead
camera
body.
panned up, away from the pool, it captured something even more dramatic than the brine pool itself. Described by NOAA as long blue-grey-black streaks of stained sediment, juxtaposed against the tan-coloured slope above the brine pool.
What?
Tracing the sediment path upwards, brine appeared to be flowing from above, down the slope
Oh, it's
and
like a
into the
stream of
pool
grunt.
below.
So you know how like whenever you like go to the beach and you like see the pool of water, but then that pool of water is moving into a bigger pool like the ocean. That's pretty much what's happening right here. It's just like rivers of brine
What they
flowing.
had found was an undersea brine waterfall. It's possible this particular waterfall began to form over 180 million years ago during the Jurassic period. Subsequently, it has cut upwards towards the sea floor in columns and ridges known as diapirs. The concentrated brine fluid, much denser than salt water as we've discussed, can flow onto the sea floor. The diapirs act like channels, directing the brine towards the low-lying areas it occupies and creating the waterfall. But what manner of creature could possibly survive down here, if indeed anything can survive at all?
Pet crab,
Phew,
like
okay, so now we know what these underwater lakes are
So,
and
like,
where they come from.
do the crabs just go down there, like, or whatever it is, just go down there? I know the mussels can't really move fast, but the crabs can just go out. But then, like, it's like a poison. Like, I've seen them go in, come out, and then just die. They just die. No, they just, what is the effect that takes a hold of the creature's body that makes it to where they can't survive? Once they go in and come out, like they're just sealed things that are too dead.
Let's dive into the real question. What is lurking down there, and what does it mean for us? At a first glance, the conditions don't exactly seem ideal for life. Unsettlingly,
For sure
scientists
can live
found the
down there.
shorelines littered with the corpses of fish, crabs, lobsters, and eels. What they didn't know is that some of those corpses have been there for decades, preserved in the super salty water, like
Nautilus
an
shell?
underwater mass grave of mummified sea creatures. But they soon realised what was happening. Whenever a fish or eel passed by, which admittedly was quite a rare sight on the deep abyssal plain, scientists noticed they mostly avoided the briny water. And when they did wander below the surface, they rarely came back. Within a few
Once they hit
seconds
that
of
jump,
diving
they
below the
can't
lake,
come
they were
back.
struck by violent convulsions. Fish writhed uncontrollably, and eels wrenched themselves in knots. This toxic shock is caused by the extreme level of salt, and it's the fate of any unlucky creature that ventures too deep into the lake.
So it's pretty much salt poison.
Once it strikes, their only hope is to rise above the surface into the familiar ocean water above. Most, however, are not so lucky. Because of these extreme levels of salt, underwater lakes are also anoxic, meaning there is no oxygen for life to survive. At least not
An
as we know it.
oxygenless.
And if that weren't inhospitable enough, the salty anoxic water is also loaded with toxic methane, which should surely snuff out any remaining chance of life. You would really
You
think
say
this is the worst
methane
place
instead
on
of
Earth to live, wouldn't
methane?
you?
What?
A toxic hot tub of death miles below the ocean's surface. No oxygen, no light, alone in the perpetual darkness of the deep sea abyss. And yet there is life, a host of fantastical creatures living in one of the most extreme habitable environments on Earth. Vast colonies of bright green tube worms stretch for hundreds of meters in all directions. Giant 100-year-old mussels packed tightly around the shores of the lake. This mussel beach is home to a carnival of shrimps, snails, weird squat lobsters, and
Just saw a group of packed up mussels a couple slides back. I don't know what you're talking about.
jelly-like crabs.
Ew.
Larger predators like fish, octopuses, and cutthroat eels
Octopi. Oh my god. That bugs me so much. Octopuses. That doesn't even sound right. Come on, gaming. You on a roll and he's rude. He's
onto the
rude.
lake in search of food, like a watering hole on the African savannah. But most successfully of all, hagfish. These slimy eel-shaped fish
Ew.
lurk on the
Nastiest
water's edge,
fish ever.
waiting for unsuspecting prey to wander into the brine. The moment that toxic shock takes hold, the hagfish swoops in and snatches their body for food. These hagfish are ancient creatures, even older than dinosaurs. Often called living fossils, they're strikingly similar to the very first vertebrates to appear on Earth hundreds of millions of years ago. But recently, scientists noticed something even more curious about them. They are the only animals that seem to be immune to the toxic effects of the lake. While all others die in seconds, hagfish come and go as they please, diving into the lake to catch their food. This, among other things, is a mystery yet to be solved. Even more staggering than how our hagfish thrives down here is how the ecosystem itself does, because it involves a toxic gas. So how on earth does this alien ecosystem actually survive? Not only is there no oxygen, extreme salinity, and a cocktail of toxic gases, there is also no sun. In fact, the submersible's headlight is the first light that has shone here since the ocean was formed.
Like this, yeah, I think
Before
the no
deep-sea
sun was a given.
ecosystems like these were discovered, scientists thought all life was powered by the sun. Green plants soak up the sun's energy and turn it into food through photosynthesis. These plants, which are then eaten by animals, form the base of the food chain. Oddly enough, this applies even in the deep ocean where the sun doesn't reach. Life here still survives on morsels of food that drift down from the surface, a marine snow made of dead plankton, sea plants and other food, all of which derive their energy from the sun.
If you've been thinking about going back to school in 2026, but the cost feels impossible, UMGC might be able to help. Last year alone, they awarded over $21 million in scholarships, and on top of that, there's federal financial.
But when researchers first stumbled upon brine pool environments, it was clear that this was something different. An oasis of life completely independent from the sun. Instead, these creatures seem to have their own mysterious source of life-supporting energy. So if it's not the sun, what do they live on? To find the answer, we need to look inside the mussels that cluster around the shores of the lake. Under a microscope, scientists found that the interiors of their shells were packed with bacteria. Now, these weren't ordinary bacteria like the kind we see every day. These were specialized bacteria with one extraordinary ability, which holds the key to the survival of the entire ecosystem.
It looks like
They can turn chemicals into food.
well,
The specific chemical is methane.
Let me
And
let's see if
fortunately for
you.
them, brine pools are loaded with it. This is called chemosynthesis. Just as green plants turn sunlight into food through photosynthesis, these bacteria can do the same thing with methane spewing out from deep in the earth.
Keep saying it and it's
So
bugging.
unlikely as it may
Like,
seem,
oh
the
my
toxic
god,
soup, which
methane.
kills almost any animal that touches it,
Look at
is
the graph.
actually the very thing that keeps them alive. Just as plant photosynthesis is the basis of life for all animals in the sun, these chemosynthetic bacteria turn the toxic methane in the pools into the
That's
lifeblood of the
crazy.
entire ecosystem. The bacteria themselves live deep in the gills of the mussels, both depending on the other for survival. In return for supplying them with energy, the mussels protect the bacteria from grazers and filter feeders. At the same time, they also provide a shelter to the shrimps, lobsters, and crabs that live and feed amongst them. Such an abundance of life in the middle of a vast and otherwise barren abyssal plain, totally independent of the sun's energy, astounded the scientists who first found it. In fact, it seemed to them that
old
these
man right
ancient
now.
life forms were a window into how life might have first begun. And now, in 2025, scientists increasingly wonder whether nearly 4 billion years ago, the first life on Earth might have appeared in an environment just like this.
Oh my
Previously, it was a
god,
very
it's
different
straight
story.
flash.
In a scrawled letter from 1871, Charles Darwin suggested that life first appeared in, as he puts it, some warm little pond with all sorts of ammonia and phosphoric salts. While it might seem so at a glance, Darwin's little pond was certainly not an underwater one, but rather a shallow tidal pool with heat, light, and electricity present. This gave rise to the popular primordial soup theory, which imagined life was born in a warm, nutrient-rich rock pool, spectacularly flashed into being by a bolt
This is
of
where you
lightning.
live. Of course, you
idea
pop
persisted
in
for
at
almost
that
a
moment
century.
right there.
But
You're
in the late
you're a literal
1900s, we
troll.
discovered deep-sea
You're a
chemosynthetic
gremlin-esque
environments like brine
creature.
pools. Everything we thought we knew about life's origins was turned on
You
its
saw
head.
that spider crab, bro?
If
That's
life
what you
could
are.
clearly survive without the sun, then
You're them
could it
damn
have
shrimps on the
started
side
in
of
a
my
similar
screen
way?
right here. You're
The
this.
first of these chemosynthetic
This is what you look like right here. That's your build and everything.
then could it have started in a similar way? The first of these chemosynthetic environments to be found wasn't actually a brine pool, but something called a
Those
hydrothermal
were
vent.
things. Not things.
Hydrothermal vents
Those
are
were shrimps and
enormous
crabs.
smoking chimneys at the bottom of the deep ocean, spewing out torrents of superheated chemical soup from deep
You
in the
don't see
earth.
Brandon
Much
educating
like
himself
brine
like that.
pools,
He's worried about
around
jobs
these
and
vents,
career.
scientists found an abundance of life, surviving not from the sun's energy,
Bro,
but from
none
the
of this
energy
stuff
in
is
that
edible,
chemical
bro. I
soup,
guarantee it.
harvested by
This is, you
colonies
probably
of
can't even eat this
chemosynthetic
stuff.
bacteria. The discovery was groundbreaking.
Bro, talk about some
Even
eating,
today,
bro.
more
That's
than
why I know
50
you big,
years
bro.
after they were first discovered, the conventional view says that hydrothermal vents are the most likely site for the very first life on
Yeah,
Earth.
those shrimps are
But
definitely
now
not edible.
there's another contender. Before brine pools were discovered, it was
You never had no
inconceivable that
exotic
life could
meals?
survive in
No.
such extremely salty conditions. But in recent years, the uncovering of rich bacterial and complex
You
life
the
there
first lady.
widens the goalposts
No,
for how
I'd rather.
and where life
It's
can
gonna be
survive.
COVID 2.0.
And there's one
COVID.
even more tantalizing piece of evidence that points towards a brine pool-like environment as the potential cradle of life. We know life almost certainly appeared somewhere in the ocean between 3.5 and 4 billion years ago. But here's the interesting thing. Scientists think Earth's primordial oceans at the time were number 1, poor in oxygen, number 2, rich in methane, and number 3, most intriguingly of all, extremely salty.
Wouldn't it be the
What
complete
else is poor in
opposite?
oxygen, rich in methane, and extremely salty? A brine pool. What this means is the brine pool environment is remarkably similar to the conditions in Earth's ancient oceans at the exact time life began. That's why scientists who study them think they might be the best analog we have of the place where life first began.
But then why can't they survive there no more?
What's that? I just built a budgeting app in Base 44.
Guys, Nina just built
And to take this a step further, could these alien environments guide the ongoing search for life beyond Earth? While this, after all, is a channel about Earth, not space, let's just take a moment to imagine. If some environments similar to Brian Paul's were to exist elsewhere in the solar system, or even beyond that, it would be as good a place as any to find life. Two of the most likely contenders are Europa, a moon of Jupiter, and Enceladus, a moon of Saturn. This is because beneath their
That's
icy
my home
crust,
planet.
they both have vast underground oceans of liquid
I used to
water.
live there, but I traveled
What's
here
more,
on a
these oceans
spaceship
are
that I
likely
built,
as
but I
salty
crashed
as the
it and
oceans on
disintegrated.
early Earth, potentially creating
And I
similar
was just
conditions
free
to
falling
those
for
where
a couple
life
of feet.
began on Earth.
I landed on a hot
Before
air
the
balloon
discovery of
and
deep
I
sea
floated
chemosynthetic environments
all
like
the way
Brian
back.
Paul's, these
Mhm.
subterranean oceans would have
Landed
been
in
written off as
Florida.
unsuitable for life.
You know,
This is because the layer of crust above blocks out the sunlight, previously thought to be essential to support living beings. But now, it's a far more exciting story. Deep in the pitch black oceans of these two distant moons, could there be briny oases of life hidden beneath the ice? It's certainly possible. Either
you
way,
can go and
we'll
fuck
have to
around
wait
and
at least
find
until the year 2030 to find out, when NASA's
parasitic
dedicated
aliens.
Clipper spacecraft will finally arrive at Europa and begin its search for life.
Hopefully I'll be dead and gone by
Of course,
now.
we're leaning towards speculation here. We simply don't know enough about Brian Paul environments to make concrete claims that life began under similar conditions, or that they can be found beneath the ice of Europa and Enceladus. What we do know is they completely changed our understanding of how life can exist. And on top of that, there's one thing we
Oh,
can
there
say
goes
with no
JTK.
doubt at all. As we continue to unravel the mysteries of these surreal underwater environments, the potential for incredible discoveries only grows. After all, who knows what wealth of secrets might still be lurking below the surface, just waiting to be found.